Hello and welcome to Forever Box and some very interesting news from World Rugby which could impact the way that the Springboks do sort of rotate the team, or maybe lack of rotation throughout the year, with confirmation of when the Rugby World Cup draw will take place. And for the first time ever, we will have a Rugby World Cup draw take place where all the teams that will play in the tournament are known, because it will take place after the final qualifying tournament in November, which means that in December, the full draw will take place. And it means that every single match from now until December will count towards ranking points, with the exception of the British and Irish Lions and Australia series, which actually means quite a lot now all of a sudden in terms of Australia missing out on potential to try and gain ranking points, as well as potentials, for example, like an Ireland, who are now going to take a weekend side on their outgoing tour. You've got the big France versus All Blacks tour. And basically the main thing is that we have got to do as Springboks everything we can this year to try and finish as the number one side in the world, because that will impact our Rugby World Cup draw, which means that it's another part of the equation that Rassie Erasmus has to factor in when picking a side and when deciding when to and who to rotate throughout the year. Before we get into it, please do smash a like on the video. Please do subscribe to the channel as well. Right, so confirmed this morning that the Dubai will host the final qualification tournament in November from the 8th to the 18th. It'll take place at the Stadium Stadium, and the 24th and last team will earn their spot in the tournament, which take place in Australia from the 1st of October until the 13th of November. Now, there will be 6 pools of 4, which is the main thing. And Belgium at the moment are a part of the teams that will go into the qualifier. We still need to find out who our African contingent will be, South America as well as Pacific. And 4 teams will to compete across 3 match days for the final place in that World Cup. Now, the main thing that we want to talk about really is the fact that over here, there we go. It's in terms of the draw and what the main thing. So the big thing that they're talking about is that the first time that it'll have a draw with all 24 participating teams, there are going to be 6 pools of 4. And the idea, the fact that it's going to take place after November international window, is that this approach ensures a more accurate and up-to-date seeding process and adds significant weight to every international test played in the remainder of the calendar year. Because basically, what we had last time is we had the draw taking place far too many years ahead and before things were really sort of, set in place. And as a result, we went into the World Cup with 3 of the top 5 teams in the world in the same pool, in Ireland, South Africa, and Scotland. We can't have that again. We need to have the pools being a bit more diverse, and we need to maybe see an opportunity for better sides in the playoffs. I mean, Scotland not making a quarterfinal, to suggest they're not within the top 8 best teams in the world, was a joke, because they definitely were at the time, and still are. And that's kind of what we're trying to get away from. Now, what does this mean for South Africa? Well, it means that Rassie Erasmus has now got to contend with keeping the number one spot. I think usually throughout the sort of in-between World Cup years, we obviously try to win rugby championships, for example, but the big thing sort of is preparing for the next World Cup. The number one team in the world doesn't always hold that much value, especially in like the year after the World Cup, for example. But now, this year, it means a lot. It particularly means a lot towards the end of the year, which means that the opportunities to rotate need to be very, very clever in terms of finding games where ranking points might not matter. But also the problem is that, you got to look at games where maybe we might not be able to gain ranking points. But if you lose a game against a smaller nation because you've rotated, you can plummet very, very quickly. And that's why all of a sudden we're not going to see like 15, 16 changes, I don't think, taking place in matchday squads throughout the year. Because if you go and lose to a Georgia, a Wales right now, even Italy, we can plummet down those rankings quite quickly and all of a sudden find ourselves in a very difficult group come the World Cup. So let's have a look at our fixture, shall we? We start, so things up against the Barbarians. This immediately is an opportunity to play a bit of fringe team. Obviously, we also want to try and make sure we can get sort of up to grips with our sort of game plan and the likes of that. This will not count towards any sort of ranking points, which is nice, because as I said, this is basically a free hit out for us, and that's why we've got that game as well. But from here against Italy, all these games will mean something. Now, the problem we've got is that playing against Italy, which is a low-ranked side, at home means there aren't a lot of world ranking points available. And maybe that's kind of where we're going to be a bit of sort of a disadvantage between our 2 tests against Italy as well as the test against Georgia, because there's not going to be a lot of ranking points available for us. However, if you risk too much rotation and Italy, for example, pitch up, and they've beaten us before, and they beat us, we can get our sort of margins in the 90s right now cut down pretty quickly. So you've got to find the balance in these 3 tests from maybe looking at different players and bringing players in, whilst ensuring that every single time we are getting the result, and ideally getting the result by 15 points or more. So if there are any ranking points available, you are gaining them from all 3 of these tests. Come August, we can't really afford to rotate, I don't think. I don't think we can afford to rotate against Australia. Yes, there are 2 home games. Maybe slightly you can rotate against, for example, maybe the Ellis Park test. But I think Australia are only getting better, and they'll be coming with the British and Irish Lions series. I'll expect them to lose it, but I think there'll be a lot of confidence because I think they might compete. We cannot afford to lose any of these games over here. Then we know we've got tough fixtures as it is. We're playing against New Zealand in New Zealand twice, and they're behind us on the rankings. They're not far behind us either. So this becomes a huge test. And similarly, then we can't really afford to take Argentina lightly. Then we go on an outgoing tour where we've got France, Italy, Wales, and Ireland. Now, here, for example, by now, when it comes to that Wales test, you'll know kind of what the situation is, and we can probably look to rotate a little bit. But we can't really afford to rotate we can't rotate at all for France and Ireland. Italy maybe to a certain point, but again, Italy at home are not a side that you want to take lightly. So there are opportunities, mainly in these sort of first 4 games. But after that, I think we're going to be limited to our rotation because we've got to make sure we're winning these games. We can't afford to slip up, against, for example, Australia. And all of a sudden, you go into the end of year series where Ireland and France, if they beat us, they can overtake us, take that number 1 spot. We lose to a France and an Ireland, for example, which could happen. And all of a sudden, you slip down to 3rd in the world, maybe even 4th in the world. And then you're 4th in the world when the rankings are when the pools are drawn, and you end up with an unfavorable pool. So there's a lot to think about in terms of these selection. This is why, you'd want to be Rassie Russell as coaching staff, because that is a lot to try and contend with. But I think it's going to add an interesting dynamic in terms of really looking at how things are going to play out. And I think that we are going to have to go full strength for quite a lot of these tests, because part of being in 2027 World Cup and winning it is going to be trying to find a group where we can afford to maybe rotate during the group stages. We couldn't really in the last World Cup. Yeah, we kind of rotated against Romania, and we did manage to do a little bit of rotation against Tonga, but we had to go full strength against Scotland. We lost against Ireland, and that all of a sudden meant that we were up against it, and we had to make sure we had to get jobs done versus Tonga, for example, which can become a bit of a slippery slope, especially given the fact that next World Cup is only be 4 teams in the group. So you don't want to have. We need to be in a group where we can win all 3 games very easily, and 1 game is going to be a potential rotation game. So you can kind of go full strength, rotate, full strength, full strength, full strength, full strength, full strength. So where do we rotate? How much do we rotate? Let me know down in the comments below. Smash like on the video, subscribe to the channel as well. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Steve. I'll chat to you soon.